Hi guys and welcome to Motor Tales. So we all have always believed that higher power and torque figures automatically make a car faster, right? But what if I told you that a car producing lesser power and torque figures on paper is actually faster than a car that produces higher power and torque figures on paper, even though the weights of the cars are similar? So to understand this, let's take a look at three popular cars in our Indian market. Let's take the BMW X1 Diesel. Let's take the Mahindra XUV700 Diesel. Let's take the Tata Harrier Diesel. So on paper, the BMW seems to be at a disadvantage. It produces significantly lesser power and torque compared to the XUV700 and the Tata Harrier. But when you look at the acceleration figures, the BMW is actually the quickest of the three. So how is it that a 147 bhp BMW is actually able to outperform SUVs that produce 170 bhp and 185 bhp? So let's find it out. So when we look at the spec sheets of the cars, the BMW X1 is powered by a 2-liter diesel engine which produces 148 bhp of power and 360 Newton meters of torque, which is paired to a 7-speed DCT transmission. And on the other hand, the XUV700 is powered by a 2.2-liter M-Hawk diesel engine that generates about 185 bhp of power and a massive 450 Newton meters of torque. It's paired with a 6-speed torque converter transmission. The Tata Harrier is equipped with a 2-liter diesel engine that produces about 170 horsepower and 360 Newton meters of torque. This engine is also mated to a 6-speed torque converter transmission. So when we look at the spec sheets, we realize that despite being the most expensive car of the three, the X1 actually has the lowest power and torque figures. But the 0 to 100 timings do tell us a completely different story. So according to BMW India, the X1 has a claimed 0 to 100 kilometers per hour timing of just 8.9 seconds. While on the other hand, the most powerful SUV of the lot, which is the Mahindra XUV700, it takes about 10 seconds and the Tata Harrier takes about 11 seconds. So why is it happening? So at the first glance, if you see the weight of the cars, the X1 is about 1560 kgs, the Harrier is about 1675 kgs, and the XUV700 is about 1855 kgs. While the XUV is noticeably heavier, the BMW and Harrier are relatively close in weight. But when we look at the power to weight ratios, they're surprisingly similar. But when we look at the 0 to 100 timings, why is it that the X1 is actually the fastest? So the answer lies in a couple of factors, which are: first reason is that the peak powered numbers do not tell us the whole story. So this is something a very few people understand. So when a brochure says that a car produces 185 bhp, that's only the maximum power that it makes at a specific RPM. It does not tell you how much power the engine is producing throughout the rest of the rev range. So for example, car A makes a strong power from 1800 RPM to 4500 RPM, whereas car B makes a strong power from 3200 RPM to 4000 RPM. Both cars may have the same peak horsepower figure on paper, but car A will accelerate faster and better because it spends more time producing useful power. So BMW engines are famous for their broad power delivery. They pull strongly across a wide RPM range rather than only developing power in a narrow power band. So simple way to think about this is horsepower is like the size of a cricket player's muscle, while acceleration is how effectively he uses those muscles. So X1's secret isn't having the biggest muscles, it's using every bit of its available power more efficiently through a superior gearbox tuning, power delivery, and a drivetrain engineering. So the second reason is the gearbox. The X1 uses a 7-speed DCT transmission, while Harrier and XUV use a traditional torque converter automatics. So what happens in a DCT is that essentially two gearboxes are working together. So while you're driving in one gear, the transmission is already preparing the next gear in advance. As a result, the gear change happens very fast. It happens almost instantaneously. So that reduces the 0 to 100 timing a lot. Whereas in a torque converter, on the other hand, it's generally smoother and more comfortable, but it's comparatively slower than the DCT. So BMW engineers also spend enormous effort in fine-tuning of the gearbox, like the gear ratios, shift points, and transmission softwares. So whenever you put a foot down, the gearbox quickly places the engine in the strongest part of its power band. While mainstream SUVs don't do this as aggressively, which means that they don't always extract the maximum performance from the engine. The third reason is that BMWs are more responsive. So another reason it feels quicker is that when you press the accelerator, BMW responds instantaneously. This is known as throttle mapping. Manufacturers can choose how aggressively a car responds to accelerator inputs. So BMW software is calibrated to feel eager and responsive. Even a small movement of the accelerator pedal produces a noticeable reaction from the engine. That is why BMWs often feel way faster than their actual power figures suggest. Gearbox of a car matters more than what most people think. Many people look at the horsepower and torque figures, assuming the car with the biggest number will always be fastest. But that's not how it works. So how it works is, let's think of a bicycle riding up a hill. So when the climb gets steep, you shift to a lower gear. So your legs don't suddenly become stronger. The bicycle becomes easier to pedal because the gears help you use your strength more effectively. A car's gearbox works in a similar way. So the engine produces power, but the gearbox decides how the power is delivered to the wheels. BMW is known for using aggressive gear ratios and a fast shifting dual clutch transmission, which allows the X1 to make most of its horsepower to use. So even though the X1 has a lower power figure on paper, it can use every bit of that power into its acceleration, which helps it outperform cars which have a significantly higher horsepower and torque figures. So the fifth factor is the drivetrain losses. Let's imagine two cars. Car A produces around 185 horsepower and it has drivetrain losses of 20%. So the power reaching the wheels is 148 horsepower. Whereas car B, it produces only 148 horsepower, but the drivetrain losses are very minimal at around 12%. So the power reaching the wheels is around 130 horsepower. So at a first glance, car A appears to have a huge advantage as it's more powerful on paper. But when we look at the actual power reaching the wheels, the gap becomes much smaller. So BMWs are known for having a highly efficient drivetrain, which means a larger percentage of the engine's power actually makes it to the wheels rather than getting wasted. So before the power reaches the road, some of it is lost during transmission, differential drive shafts, and other drivetrain components. So these losses are known as drivetrain losses. And BMWs are known for having highly efficient drivetrains, which means a larger percentage of the engine's power actually makes it to the wheels. So while the BMW X1 may feel underpowered on paper, the differences in real-world wheel horsepower may be much smaller than what the actual brochure figure suggests. In conclusion, we must never judge a car's performance only on the basis of its on-paper specifications. While power and torque figures are important, they don't tell the complete story. As we have seen, factors such as power delivery, gearbox tuning, transmission technology, throttle response, and drivetrain efficiency can have a huge impact on how a car performs in real world. That is why sometimes a car with lower horsepower and torque figures on paper can sometimes be quicker than a car with a significantly higher power and torque figures. Thank you for watching this video. If you found it informative, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel for more automotive content. See you in the next one.